Meet Jonah. He paces his apartment hallway with the phone pressed to his ear. "You gotta do it, man," his cousin Zachary says on the other line. "You've been talking about building something on your own for years." "I know," Jonah replies. "I really want to, but..." He doesn't finish the sentence. He doesn't have to, because "but" is always there. "But I have 4 kids. But what if I fail? But I don't even know where to start." Jonah has been in SaaS for over 20 years. He knows product launches, systems, how to lead teams, but lately he's felt trapped. Trapped in boring, meaningless meetings, trapped in micromanagement, trapped in the Groundhog's Day of doing the same thing over and over again at a job that used to inspire him, but now depletes him. And Jonah has so many good ideas. He could create a consulting business to help small SaaS firms to scale quickly. He also could create frameworks to help make smooth and clean product software launches. He could start a coaching business for project managers that are just starting out in their careers to help them to develop and grow. He has the spark, but there's also the pressure, the self-doubt, the anxiety, the overthinking of every step before taking even one. Jonah's day ends as it always does. He puts the kids to bed, ignores the piano practice he used to love, sits on the couch, pulls out his phone, and looks at job postings that he will never apply to. Jonah's exhausted, not just physically, but mentally. And what he's looking for most is clarity, courage, the courage to take a calculated risk. Today, I'm chatting with Kevin Karschnik, a global keynote speaker on positivity, mindset, and avoiding burnout. Kevin has over 30 years of experience helping people to cultivate a healthier mindset and to be able to make a greater impact. Kevin himself has started multiple successful businesses, and he's helped others to go beyond just adopting an entrepreneurial mindset, but to creating a plan of action. And I'm excited to hear how Kevin would advise someone like Jonah, someone who has a lot of great ideas, but is struggling with execution, who's struggling with taking that first step. My name is Jay Abbasi, and welcome to Unstuck. Real people, real stories, real solutions. While the details are changed to protect anonymity, what you just heard is based on a true story of challenges that come up in the real world. And we discuss how to navigate these environments with practical tips to help you get unstuck and build a more fulfilling, impactful, and balanced life and career. So Kevin, I wanted to ask you to tell the story that you told me when we first met about your 500-mile walk across Spain, because I found it to be fascinating. So can you tell us about that adventure, that experience?
Well, it started about 2 years ago when I heard an author named Arthur Brooks talk about it on one of his podcasts. He had talked about it in his books. And I asked a good friend of mine who is a Catholic if he had heard of the El Camino de Santiago. And he's like, yes. He goes, we grew up in the church talking about that and everybody wishing that they could go on that walk. And I'm not Catholic, but I had some goals of wanting to go do something out of my comfort zone, challenging myself to say, could I walk 500 miles? That was one of it. Second part was I wanted to connect deeper with God. And I thought it was an opportunity, 35 days, walking 15 miles a day, 500 miles across the country of Spain would help me connect with God. And there was definitely some of that. I also wanted to unplug as I'm transitioning into retirement. I wanted to disengage from social media, disengage from everyday emails and Zoom meetings and teaching classes and delivering keynotes. And so this gave me that opportunity to step back and do that. And so those were some of my goals of wanting to do that. And it was challenging. as easy as maybe I thought going into it. Oh, it won't be difficult. I'll just walk 15 miles, no big deal. But it was physically challenging, and then the emotional aspect of it was challenging as well, as you're just physically drained, mentally drained, and trying to say, how do I get to the next town, and how do I finish this day and not be exhausted? So
Yeah.
it was an adventure.
I mean, it's amazing. 500 miles. My goodness. Uh, I mean, is that something that's been wired in you? Like that tendency to want to get out of your comfort zone and push yourself? Like, tell me a little bit about where that comes from.
I am going to credit my mom. My mom was an entrepreneur. She sold Avon, she sold jewelry, and was just always wanting to get out of the comfort zone. And I think of it as a process. I think it's something that some people get stuck in the comfort zone of what they do every day. And for me, it's a process, and it's 4 steps. I leave your comfort zone into what's called the fear zone. And that fear zone is where there's uncertainty, and could be when you're leaving a job. It could be when you're trying something that you've never done before. I picked up pickleball, for example, as a hobby about 4 years ago, and wasn't good at it at first, but that fear zone of, all right, I'll just push through this. I'm going to learn as much as I can. And getting out of your comfort zone into the fear zone, you've got to take that step. You go to the third zone, which I call the learning zone, which is, I call it the sponge zone. You're going to absorb information. I'm going to learn something positive, it's going to succeed, and I'm going to keep going, or I fail. I think of failure as FAIL, first attempt in learning. I didn't succeed, but I learned something, and I'm going to push through that. And then I land in what's the fourth zone I call the growth zone, and you've expanded your horizon. So yes, I've always had that. I thank my mom, and I also thank my best friend and my business partner, Russ Peterson, because we started our first business when we were in college, first real business. And so ever since then, it was like, why are we following a traditional path when we could be entrepreneurs our whole life and never have a boss? And so I think, yes, it's been ingrained in me that way.
And I think having the relationship with your mother and seeing her go through it, I'm sure, is what helped to establish that mindset. And I guess, what do you feel that gets in the way for people? Because I mean, we're going to get into Jonah's story later in a little bit, but that fear that comes up, it could be so stifling. It can hold so many people back. And I feel like there isn't a person in the world that hasn't thought about building something on their own. Yet it's something that's so rare. It's something that you don't see very often. So what do you feel holds people back the most?
It's the security. It's the security of saying that I work for X company, and I've got benefits, and I've got the job security of, if I do my work, I'll get promoted. I'll go from an individual contributor to a manager to a director to a vice president. I'll see my pay increase. I might have stock options. And so all of that starts to keep us tied there. And what I've told my kids, I've got a 27-year-old son who's a financial planner, and a 24-year-old daughter who's now transitioning to a teacher. And I've told them, I said, do you want to have all of your eggs in one basket? I go, if you work for one organization, I go, they could make a change and say, you're no longer going to be a part of our future plans and you're gone. I go, as an individual entrepreneur, I go, I've got 100 clients. I go, I could be fired by 7 of them and it wouldn't put any impact on my business. And so I feel like the diversity of my portfolio with multiple clients is more secure than having an individual employer. But I think that's part of it. Here's the second part. I think that's the bigger challenge for most folks. They deal with a financial issue of, I expect to make the exact same money right out of the gate when I go start my new business. And that's not the case. It takes a solid, I always tell people, 18 months of building up. So before you step away from that business, you have 18 months of income that you need set aside so that you're relying on that as you transition into this entire new venture.
These are great talking points. I want to dive into both of those things that you just pointed to. The first one was around, I love the way you put it. You said if I have 100 clients and 7 fire me, I still have plenty of business there. Yeah. That is a shift in mindset, isn't it, Kevin? Because no one thinks of it like that. People don't think of it like that. They think there's such a bigger risk with entrepreneurship because I'm going out on my own. But what you just suggested was the exact opposite, which is you're actually taking more of a risk investing everything into one company.
Yeah. Well, we all know somebody that it's a neighbor, it's a friend, it's a relative that had been laid off. And we've seen lots of layoffs over the last kind of, I'm going to say 10 years as things have gone up and down. And so they've got all their eggs in one basket. And then we also know other people that are entrepreneurs that are still saying, yes, business is down, but I'm not bankrupt.
Yeah, exactly. And with the entrepreneur, you can always earn more revenue. Like you're never stuck in, I'm only going to make this amount and I can never make more. You could always go out and get more business. And then you touched on the second thing was the financial component. So can you dive a little bit more into that? So you said 18 months. So are you suggesting that someone would need to know how much they require in regards to their basic needs on a monthly basis and have 18 months roughly, let's say, saved before they took the full leap into entrepreneurship?
No doubt. And this is where I'm going to tap into my son as a financial planner as he helps people do this to say, what is your monthly budget? And if you have no clue and you're not aware of what my income is and what my expenses are, then it's really hard to step out because you don't know where to put boundaries around what are my expenses. And if you sit there and can come up with, and let's use some easy math, somebody who makes $60,000 a year, $5,000 a month is my income. You need to set aside about $90,000 in an account that you are going to draw from. So there's my salary. I'm going to be drawing a $5,000 a month salary from this fund that I've set aside or borrowed, which is not my favorite way to approach it, but I'd like for somebody to have saved that up. And then that's the transition. And so one month I might make $1,500. The next month I might make 500. You know, month 12, I've made $8,000. And so I've got a little bit of a surplus that month. Having that transition will help you get your business started and you won't feel the pressure of, I have one more month and I've got to make this work. No, I've got 18 months of a ramp to get to a place where I can then feel like I've got that safety. And you don't feel safe as an entrepreneur. I don't feel like ever, but there's really about a 5-year startup where you get to a place where business is stable. And I think that people don't have that mindset coming from a corporate background where that's my employment, that's my job, and I'm going to be, forever at that job if I don't make a change.
Well, earlier you said that we all know someone who has been eliminated from a role. So I would argue that the illusion of safety in a corporate role is just that. It's an illusion. It does not actually exist. There is just as much of a risk. And then when you were just diving into the financial point, I really like the idea of it being like a salary. Like this is what you're paying yourself. I never thought of it that way. You're pay yeah. But the other part of it was knowing your expenses. So I'm curious now that you brought that up, but what's your process with that? Like, do you have a system in place where you really know financially what your needs are? Like, do you have this down on a spreadsheet somewhere? What's your process of doing that, Kevin?
Well, there's two parts to that. And the first part is, where are my personal expenses? So yeah, easily go pull up your savings, go pull up your checking account and go back for the last 2 years and say, all right, I'm spending an average of $50 on my cell phone. I'm spending an average of $100 on my electric bill. And so being able to pull the averages for the last 2 years personally. And then from a business standpoint, maybe not knowing if you're brand new into the entrepreneurial idea of, I don't know what my expenses are going to be. You start talking to other entrepreneurs. What are you paying for health insurance? What is your monthly website maintenance fee? How much did it cost you to get your website up and running? What's your social media budget? So as you start to figure out what those business expenses are, and I'm going to start with what are the bare minimum expenses because you want to start small. You kind of work your way up to, I don't need a $5,000 a month marketing budget. I can start with something at $500 or start by doing it all myself. I can do social media. I can do Facebook and Instagram and Snapchat, and I can do a lot of that on my own until I can afford to pay somebody to do that. So those are the two pieces. Personally, what are my expenses? Secondary, what do I anticipate my business expenses to be, startup and monthly?
And so much of that information you just said, you don't need to only figure out on your own. You could ask people. You don't need to sit and use ChatGPT to ask 100 questions and hopefully it guesses right. Just talk to somebody who's in the space that you're interested in exploring and find out what their expenses are, and then you can make a much more logical estimate as to what the needs will be for marketing, for whatever the business requires. And so,
Ask questions to them of what do you love? And Jay, I'll flip it to you on this. I mean, this question. I mean, we're both entrepreneurs. I mean, what's your favorite part about being an entrepreneur? And then if I'm brand new into this and I've never experienced starting my own business, I might also ask you, being honest, be transparent with me. What are the downfalls? Give me the cons. So give me the pros, give me the cons. Like, what jumps out for you to say, I love blank about being an entrepreneur? And here's a yellow flag called a caution. I mean, watch out, because this could be a trap. And some people don't think about this when they want to step into that type of world.
yeah, I could answer that right now, and then you could tell me what yours would be. I mean, what I love most is the freedom. And when I say freedom, I don't mean that I'm sitting on a beach, drinking Mai Tais all day. I mean, I could if I want to, right? But I love what I do. So I love the creative freedom to be able to add value in a way that I want to add value. I like the freedom of being able to experiment with trying different things without needing any permission to do so. And then, yes, the freedom of my schedule, which is to say, if I decide, which I'm doing this weekend, I'm going to block out my Friday and I'm going to take my daughter down to the Jersey Shore and spend some quality time, just she and I can do that. I'm not requesting any time off from anyone. So that freedom, and then of course the freedom to be able to earn as much as I'd like to earn, right? The way I've built out my business, the more demand or the more activity will then produce greater results. I don't need hundreds of millions of dollars. I just like to be able to have the balance while being able to earn a good living. Now, the downside, if I were to be honest with the answer, it is that it does all fall on me, and at times that can be hard. Which is to say, if something unexpected happens, like one of my employees decides to leave because they're pursuing some other opportunity or a career, and I have to backfill that person, it's like, okay, I have to stop everything and figure that out, right? Like, there's no one else that's going to do that. And I'd say the other thing that came to mind is I have to be so careful of my time, because if I lose a few hours in a week doing something that ends up not producing a result, that's time I'll never get back, and it can be pretty detrimental to the momentum of the business. So those are what are your answers to this? Like, what you love most, or what you love the most, because you're moving into retirement, and what were some of those yellow flags?
Agreeing with everything you're saying. I'm nodding, going, yes. I mean, there's that freedom of how do I want to invest my time? And that's that balance too. And I love you kind of alluded to the money aspect of it. Is, do I want to make more money? That's great. Then maybe you are putting in 80 hours a week. And if you're single and you're having no commitments outside, you can have that balance that way, where it's all lopsided towards business. But then as family enters in, you start to shift and say, you know what? I don't want to make as much money. That's not my number one goal. I actually want balance. I actually want to make enough money to be happy, to take the vacations and pay the mortgage and pay off the cars, and then spend a ton of time with my family. And so there's that flexibility from the time. Um, I also would always come back to the fact that I don't take orders well. So then for somebody to sit here and tell me what to do, it's like I immediately want to get defensive and push back. Whereas, no, these are my ideas now, and I'm going to execute them. And I'm quick to fail. I really like that approach. That if there's something that comes up, it's a new idea. Let's try it. Let's go right at it hard. And if it works, great. We'll keep going. If it doesn't, we can stop and evaluate and back off. And so I don't know if I always felt like I had that freedom. I've had a couple of instances where I worked at major companies, and I didn't feel like I had the freedom to go do something without getting permission. There was a lot of red tape. So love all that. The transparency on the flip side of that, when it comes to, what are the downsides, and that's why I said, when somebody could be honest with you, when you're starting up, you have to be in control of your schedule. I really believe that entrepreneurship is not for everybody. Some people need that schedule. Some people need to know that I need to be in an office. I'm supposed to be at my desk at 8 o'clock and I can leave after 5. Like, they need that structure. there's no structure when you're an entrepreneur, and you've got to be able to wake up every morning and motivate yourself to say, I don't have anything on my calendar for this whole week. I've got no income coming in, and yet I have got to sit here and be posting on social media. I need to be writing articles. I need to be reaching out to clients. I need to be developing content or writing code, depending on what your business is. And so you have got to stay true to that schedule. And I think that people don't think through because you don't have anyone keeping you accountable. And that accountability might be something that people do appreciate when they go into an office and have that structure. So those are
Yeah.
two things that jump out that add on to what you just said, because I 100% agree with the two things you said.
Yeah. The word that came to my mind is discipline in what you just described.
Yeah.
It's like, for anyone who, well, we've all, I think, at some point went to school. And so you go to school, there's a schedule. It's there for you. You're going to go to this class, this class, this class. It's created. When the bell rings, you move to the next thing, and then you have a lunch period, and then the end of the day. And having that for some people in their careers is helpful for them to stay on task. And if they were told that they have to create it on their own, they would really struggle. So I guess with that, it means you need to know your own personality, your own tendencies. And it doesn't mean that you couldn't become an entrepreneur.
Right.
You just need to be aware that that's something you're going to have to build the muscle for.
Yep. And something that my wife and I do every Thanksgiving, the Monday after, we do Weight Watchers for 3 weeks. And I'm not trying to lose weight, but it's more about being aware of what I eat for a 3-week period. We have to write down every cookie, every Coke, every, anything that we're putting into our mouth. We have to write that down. And so when you zoom out after 3 weeks, you're like, all right, I always thought I ate a cookie or so a week, but according to this little schedule, I ate 12. And so you're more aware of it. And I'm using that as the example to set up that if you were to do a time audit of your time as an entrepreneur for a week, and you sit there and say, all right, I spent 8 hours of my week on social media this week, sometimes posting, but sometimes scrolling. And some of that time could have been shifted over, or I didn't start my day, if I'm being, honest with myself as I track this, and starting my day until 9 a.m. every day. And maybe if I were getting up at 7 and getting started a little bit sooner, I could get more done. And so doing that time audit of yourself to be very realistic of this is what my schedule looks like could be that help for somebody when they're getting their business started.
I love it. And I learned that from a mentor years ago, going through a time audit. And yeah, it's annoying to have to do. It's not
Feels
fun.
like a waste of time when you're doing it. Yes.
Right. But what valuable data.
Yep.
I used an app. I remember it was called a time logger, I think was the name of it. And you can create categories and determine what you label everything. So it would be time with my daughter. I'd have my gym. I would have time in email, time on with clients and all that. And it was so valuable. I learned a lot about how I was spending my time and what I could maybe cut out, simplify, reduce, and what I wanted to spend more time on. So you have, Kevin, you've been been an entrepreneur in different seasons and of your life. What do you feel is the priority of how you spend your time so that you succeed as an entrepreneur? Like if you were to say, Jay, it's this one thing or these two or these three things that when I spent my time doing those specific activities, that's how I found success as an entrepreneur. What are those activities?
I think it starts with the fact that what's going to bring the revenue in, and let's fill in the blank on whatever the business is, and whether it's a training business that I started. What I want to do is I want to spend time reaching out to clients, potential clients, and spending tons of my time, 80% of my time cold calling, 80% of my time door knocking. This is 35 years ago, and finding clients. Whereas I think people flip this and they spend 80% of their time developing content, 80% of their time writing the book that they think is going to put them on the map, or designing their website, or writing code. And they're spending the time developing the product when that you need that. But I think you can have the concept before I reach out to to as many clients as I can because I need the business. If the revenue's not there, I don't care how great your product is. You can have the best product in the world, the best service in the world with no clients, you're going to go broke. And so spend 80% of your time investing in how do I find clients? How do I am constantly talking to clients? And it's a lot of work. It's breakfast meetings, it's lunch meetings, it's meeting people for coffee, it's making those 100 phone calls a day that nobody wants to make, and knowing that 97 of them are not going to get returned. And the three that do get returned, whether those emails or phone calls, it might just be an inquiry of like, tell me more. And it's not a sale. And so those three turn into one, and that one turns into a sale, every month. And so you know the math. And so
Oh yeah.
invest in finding the business and then work on the coding, the writing, the content, the curriculum later, as you land those clients.
I love it. I love it. And I am so glad that you answered it that way, because I'm having so many of these conversations with people who come to me and say, Jay, I want to start a business. Can you help me? Because they see I had success as an entrepreneur. And sometimes I'm coaching these people for long periods of time. Sometimes it's more of a casual conversation. It's always about what you just said. I'm always recommending to people, do your outreach, follow up, have consistency in the outreach. If you do that, you'll find success because you're having good conversations with the right people. Don't worry so much about the color schemes on the website.
Yeah.
Don't spend hours and hours creating that PDF that you think will invite people into your business and give them all the clarity. No. Send out the emails, make the calls, whatever is the business model. Spend your time doing that. And I know you will succeed. Success at that point then becomes inevitable.
Yep. And you also might learn by having talked to these clients that what you built wasn't exactly what they wanted. And I'm going to rewind all the way back to the very, very beginning of my career in 1991. I just left Dell. I was in sales selling computers, and on the phone, I kept hearing people all the time saying, how do you use this thing? How do you use this thing? And so this is 1991, 35 years ago. And so I said, I got an idea. I need to start a company teaching people how to use computers. But it wasn't what my passion was. The company I'd started while I was working there was I wanted to be a motivational speaker. I wanted to be Zig Ziglar. I wanted to be a keynote speaker. And so I was positioning all of my marketing materials that I was creating around being a keynote speaker. But then when I left Dell and started my first company, all I kept hearing about was, we want you to teach us how to use a computer. And so we had to shift our mindset and say, what I thought I was going to build and wanted to sell is not what my clients are asking about. Let me give them what they want, which is right now computer training. And 8 years later, I mean, that turned into business. And we ended up selling it and shifting to something else. But I listened to what the clients wanted. And so I think that's also the approach. Before you build that website, before you build that code or write that curriculum, what is it that your clients want? And then give it to them.
Kevin, I learned that the hard way, my friend. I could tell you years ago when it was COVID, when I had to make a shift. I started out in consulting when I left Tesla years ago. And earlier you said, you experiment with things, you see what you like, you don't like. I didn't love that with consulting. I still had to do things their way too much. I didn't have the creative freedom that I really wanted. And then when the pandemic hit, I decided I'm going to start a coaching business, and I wanted to do one-on-one coaching. Okay. Yep. Now, I made the mistake of assuming what people needed without having the conversation. So I spent so much time developing curriculum and content, and it was like hours and hours. And then I started to realize I need to commit to the outreach and start having these conversations. So some flip switched in me. And then when I had those conversations, Kevin, I'm hearing, wait, they don't need anything that I created in this whole library of resources. They need different things. And so I had to basically change it all to meet the needs of my market. And now looking back, I realized, well, hey, no regrets. I learned a valuable lesson. And that lesson is, don't make assumptions about what people need. Ask them directly and then build it.
Yeah. And one more thing to add to that, I love everything you said. Agree with all of it. Is if you are at a corporation right now and you're thinking about saying, you know what, I do want to branch out. I want to put my feet in the water and see what this entrepreneurial world's like. Start the business while you're still employed. You can build the website. You can start writing content. You can start writing code. You can start writing that book. You don't have to quit your job to then spend months building all the marketing materials. You can spend that time, and you do have to be dedicated to it. I'm a huge Dave Ramsey fan. He's always a huge fan of the idea of you can have a job outside of your job as you're trying to get yourself into a good financial position. So as you're making that transition into being an entrepreneur, build the website, write the content, write the code while you're employed. And yes, it's a few extra hours a week. And then that transition into that business is going to be a lot smoother because you've already built all that back end content while you were somewhere else. And you can still meet with clients and still and pitch your ideas to people while you're employed. And it kind of brings a lot of power there because, hey, as an employee of Tesla, for your example, you're talking to people with credibility now from the position that you have.
Yeah. And I'm glad you debunked the myth that you need to drop everything, burn the boats,
Yeah.
and take this huge risk. It's not true. It's not the only approach. I've referenced this in previous recordings of the podcast. Adam Grant's work, he wrote the book Originals, really points to the research behind this, which is people who come up with original ideas and take the road less traveled are very often not taking a big risk. They're building it gradually, Kevin, over time, the way you described. And then when they feel the business is at a place where it can supplement or even increase, go beyond their income, then they leave the organization. So I think this is a good opportunity to talk a little bit about what Jonah's going through, because there's so many different things that we could advise him to consider here. So when you read Jonah's story, what did you think, or where did you think you would start with Jonah? Where would you start, Kevin?
First place I would start with Jonah is to help him identify what are your strengths? What are things that you do well that you want to lean into? And what are weaknesses, or I'm going to call them saboteurs, that might be holding me back from success? Because some of it's in our head, some of it's what I call the judge, or we have that imposter syndrome that's constantly creeping in, telling us, oh, you can't do this. You don't have enough experience. You're not an entrepreneur. That's not your background. And so then we start to question ourselves. So the first thing is lean into what your strengths are. And there's some great materials out there. Strengths Finder 2.0 is a great book to go read by Dr. Rath in terms of what you can identify as something that works for you. But I'll also mention there's a free website where you can go to a website called the high5test.com. And that's the word high, the number five, and then test.com is the website to go to. And it's a free assessment, and you can identify the things that you're doing well. On the flip side of that, your weaknesses, or I like this author, his name is Shirzad Sharmain. He wrote a book called Positive Intelligence, and he created a saboteur assessment. And you can go to his website, positiveintelligence.com. And there's a button there called saboteurs. You take the assessment and learn about things that could hold you back from being successful. And I'll give you an example of one from mine. My number one was high achiever. And I was just like, that's a saboteur? Like, what's wrong with that? And I was questioning it. And I actually went and took a class on this assessment to learn more about what my results were. And it's when you've got these blinders on and you're so focused on succeeding that everything else becomes the back burner. And that could be your family. That could be exercise. That could be hobbies. And that came up in Jonah's story where everything else was getting put aside. And so those are saboteurs that would hold you back from success if you're not aware of them. And all we have to do is expose them. And so the idea that, hey, I don't want that to happen to me, that the identification of here's what I do well, here are things that could hold me back from succeeding. That's the first place I would start. So let's identify what Jonah does well and what are some things that could sabotage his success as he wants to either continue at his organization or potentially branch out and do something on his own.
Yeah. What you're pointing to is self-awareness, being aware of your own strengths and I often term it as potential pitfalls.
Yep.
Potential pitfalls where the holes could be that you could slip into without meaning to, where you can fall into a ditch somewhere because it's just a natural tendency of yours, it's your personality type. It isn't to say that you're then pointing to something that's quote unquote wrong with you. It's just that's a thing that could happen that could hold you back, right? That's the way you framed it. What are your thoughts on asking others for that as well? So yes, you could do that self-assessment work. I think the websites that you shared, going through assessments, all valuable. How about gathering that from others so you can get that perspective from the people who've had the opportunity to either work with you or have seen you in action?
No doubt. It's called the 360 assessment, where you go all around, and you could even do it at your employment to say, I'm boss, I just want to better myself. And I want to get your feedback on things you think that I'm doing well and some things that you think I could work on. And one of my structures I use, and I borrowed this from Clint Eastwood, I call it the good, the bad, and the new. His is good, bad, ugly. Good, tell me, boss, what am I doing good? Give me all my positives. What am I doing bad? And if you don't like that word, just frame it up. Things I could be doing better, areas of improvement. And then the third bucket are things I could be doing new or different moving forward. So I want to get that directly from my boss. So that's above. Then I go to the side, and that's my peers, people that I'm working with. And this is where you can branch out to family members. I'm going to ask my spouse. I'm going to ask my neighbors. I'm going to ask my relatives. Give me the good, the bad, the new about me from your thoughts. And if you are in a leadership position, asking your employees. So now people that report to you. And that's that perspective of all around. So the more people you talk to, the more feedback you're going to get. I think of it as data. It's why I picked up an Aura ring a couple of years ago. It tracks my steps. It tracks my stress levels. It tracks my sleep. And I just want data. The data is going to help me say, hey, I need to move more today. I've been sitting too much, or I need to really work on my stress levels because it's showing that I've had high levels of stress today. And what caused that? And what could I do to dive in to fix that? So the more data we have, the more information that I can use to then better understand my strengths and my weaknesses.
I agree, and being able to analyze all of that objectively, you don't need to get caught into it where there's this emotional attachment and you get so frustrated. And you mentioned the judge, right, which is judging yourself over every little thing. That's not the intent of the exercise. It's so that you can really just gather the data and have a very clear picture of what's going to be something that will, if you double down on, be a strength that where you can add some meaningful value, and what could potentially limit you or hold you back. Now, one of the things that I think is holding Jonah back, and it's something that happens, I think, often with people who are exploring entrepreneurship, is he has too many ideas. And I don't mean that in a negative way. It's just he's like, well, I could get into consulting. I can create a way where there could be software rollouts that are going to be smoother through some sort of programming. Or maybe I can get into coaching and helping other program managers starting early in their careers. How would you help him to be able to identify what's the right path? Because I think too often people get caught in that fork in the road, Kevin. They're like, maybe I'll do this, maybe I'll do this, but they don't move forward because they have too many options that they're considering.
Yeah, it's overload. And I'm going to back up before I answer that question, only to have him have better clarity on what are the things that are important to me in my life. So I would say, let's do a core value exercise of what is it that really, gets you ticking and moving in the morning. And so if you sit there and you zoom out and say, all right, let's do my strengths, let's do my saboteurs. And now let me identify my core values. Every organization has values that they use to make decisions for the company. I think individually we need to have these. And when you're in alignment with that, I'll give you an example of mine. I'll ask you yours. My top three, number one is my spiritual aspect. So my faith. My number two is my family. And number three is optimism. And so I stop and I say, that's my filter for making decisions. Does this align with my faith? Will this align with my family? And does this positively impact me and other people that I interact with every day? And when that's that filter, I can stop and say, that's the first thing I want to think about. Let's go back to Jonah, coaching be that? Will this one-on-one training that I might be able to do? Will the coding be there? What do I want to play with? Does these options first and foremost align with my values? So let me flip that really quick to you before we go back to Jonah. What about you? What are your values? What are things that drive you and that are most important to you?
Yeah. What I appreciate about your question is the fact that it changes too. I mean, what it is today is not exactly what it was even a few years ago. What I consider my guiding principles or my values to be, and I can tell you that one, for example, for me is always learning. I always want to keep learning. And to me, I want to be in positions, or I want my professional career to be one where I am always learning. I am always growing. And so that's one for me, is learning. Another one is and this is more of a new one that's just happened through all the research I've done, and my recent discoveries on what I really think matters most in our lives is connection. It's connection. I want to always be proactively establishing or reestablishing connection to others, connection to my environment, connection to the work that I'm doing, so that there's meaning to this work. So those are examples. And I guess what we're saying here, and this is for anybody listening, is once you establish those, you then want to decide on the path that allows for you to activate and tap into those values more
Yes.
frequently.
Yep. Well, and just going to yours, I mean, one of the comments that I was going to think about when you were saying that about learning is there's people we know that are know-it-alls. And I said, those are not the people I like to be around. I love to be around learn-it-alls. And you're one of those. And so I want to learn anything. And I'm going to learn from anybody that I interact with if I'm willing to ask the right questions and be a great listener when I ask those questions, which you do all those things. So number one. Number two, relationships. You're doing it. I mean, reaching out to people with the different interviews and having a variety of clients that you're constantly building these relationships with, and that's the work side. And then you've obviously got the personal side. You said the values can change over time as different seasons in our life change. And so, when I was single to when I was married to, we're now empty nesters. There's different relationships that I have, and values can shift somewhat as we grow into different seasons of our life. So going back to Jonah, then that's the first place I would start, is understanding what are those values to align with where I want to go. But then the second piece of that is experiment. I didn't know if I was going to like pickleball. I thought I would try it 4 years ago, picked up a paddle, played a few games, wasn't loving it at first. And then I kept at it. I don't think you can try something once and say it's not for me. I tried yoga, I tried painting, tried running, I tried biking, I tried walking, I tried just different activities to say, what would I like that would align with what I want to do? And so what I would go to Jonah and say, what would coaching look like? Let's build that business out. And what would your daily schedule look like? And, is that passion for your coaching to be one-on-one with an individual? Or let's flip to the next, level of that. Would you rather teach people instead of coaching them, which now means you're standing in front of a room of 10 people or 1,000 people? And so that 10 people would be a workshop and 1,000 people would be a keynote. Maybe you're more of a speaker than a one-on-one consultant. And so what would each of these paths look like? And then I would ask, what really brings you joy? I mean, where are you starting to feel that passion? And one thing that if it aligns, if you could sit here and say, "Hey, I'm pretty good at this. I feel real passionate about doing something, and people are going to pay me some money for it." I call that your sweet spot. I mean, that's how you find your sweet spot. I'm pretty good at it. People are going to pay me for it, and I like doing it. Doesn't feel like you're working when you do that.
Yeah. Yeah, the sweet spot. You're right. And one of the ways I often word that is, what are you doing when it feels like time flies?
Yeah, love it. Yeah.
If time is flying, you are in that flow state. And if, as you said, it's paired with something that you actually are really great at and someone's willing to compensate you for, you've hit that zone of genius. And so what I want to
add to it, when I was on the walk, going back to your opening question about my Camino walk, I not a lot, but I played some music during the walk occasionally, because there's only so many thoughts you can have while you're walking 500 miles, and there are many times I'm by myself and I'm singing. I love to sing. love it, passion. I mean, like you talk about time flying while I was singing. But that's one of the three ingredients, right? I love it, passionate about it. Second, not good at it at all. No one would want to hear me. And part three, no one ever is going to pay me to sing. And so you have to zoom out and say, not only do I love what I do, am I good at it? And going back to your question about the 360 is, are there people telling me I'm good at it? And then is there a market that can pay me fairly for what I'm doing? And again, as you mentioned, I'm not trying to be a 100 millionaire. I just want to make a good living and have a good balance, doing something I love to do, balanced with a lot of other fun things in my life.
Yeah, yeah. I think you nailed it. I think you gotta be able to differentiate and discern a hobby from what could be a real career or business.
Bingo.
And
Yeah. And if
I
the
want
well, a piece of that, if the passion part's missing, let's say you're super good at it, and let's go back to Jonah. I'm really good at my job. I'm getting paid really well for what I do, but I don't love it. Now that piece is missing, and so that is now just a job, and so that's not your sweet spot. So that's any missing piece of those three, then you've got to stop and examine why.
I'm with you 100%, Kevin. And I think that what I always do at the end is I want to give you, let's say, in a scenario where you meet Jonah in this story. If, let's say, I know your book is coming out, you said around, it could be Thanksgiving or before Christmas. Let's say Jonah reads the book and then he wants to speak with you and he finds a way to connect with you and he tells you his story and what he's working through. And you, of course, you listen, you acknowledge it. And then you have an opportunity to ask him a question or two to hopefully get him to take more action towards what he ultimately wants to do, and that's build something on his own. What would you ask him, Kevin?
First and probably most important question, and Jay, I want you to think about it for your life as well. If you could fast forward to when you're 90 years old, it's your 90th birthday, and you're going to look back at your entire life and say, they're celebrating me because I did this, I accomplished this, I, had this family, I reached this level of success in this area, all of the things that you could look back to say, I did these things. What would that look like? And you've really got to be specific about breaking it down to say, from a business standpoint, do I want to say that I worked 40 years in corporate America? Or do I want to say I did 20 years in corporate America, decided that wasn't for me, and my last 20, I was an entrepreneur? That's Jonah's story. If that's the story, we need to start taking a step towards that. If we stop and looked at your finances, and you're being real, who doesn't want $100 million? But if I'm being real and saying I don't need that, I would be really happy if I could make, pick a number, $10,000 a month. I'm happy and I can do everything I want to do and have a happy life. Then what would that look like from a financial piece? And you got to think about socially, like my interactions with my family, interactions with friends. I need that social component. I need a hobby. What are some things that I would love to have done? And so as you look back from your 90th birthday to say, I played piano and I wasn't a professional. I didn't get a CD recorded. Boy, I just dated myself with that reference. I didn't get uh, a single on Spotify released or Apple Music. But I love playing and my family loves listening to me at holidays and I get to play piano, even in the community that I live. And so there's a hobby that I would have loved to have said that I've done my whole life. And so when you stop and you examine that at age 90 to say, this is what my life would have looked like to say I've lived the life I wanted. Now I've got to stop and say, all right, whether you're 23, 53, 73, what do I need to do to get to that spot to where I'm doing those things? And what changes do I have to make today? Like, I can't wait. I can't keep putting off till tomorrow and next week. And, oh, I got to wait till next quarter. Or I got to wait till those stock options. Or I really need to wait until I'm closer to retirement. We've got to put all that stuff off and say, what can I start doing today? That didn't say quit your job. What can I start doing today? Can I start building that website? Can I start prioritizing my piano lessons? Can I start prioritizing taking a walk every day to make sure that I reach those goals when I'm 90 years old? So that would be my number one thing. And that would be for Jonah. And then I'm going to go to you. What about you? I'll answer it if you want, but what about you? You're 90 and you look back and saying, all right, these are the things I wish I would have accomplished. And then my bigger question to you is, what are you going to do about it starting today?
Kevin, it's something I think about often. I mean, I frequently think about this. It's a daily practice for me to be able to do that type of zoom out the way you just described and be able to really see, okay, when I do get to the end and I'm looking back, what do I want to have achieved? As well as what's going to be the most important and meaningful experiences that I wish to have. And so I'm mindful of time because I don't want to go on a 10-minute diet. I could go on, my friend, if I wanted to. But I could say, the things that really matter to me will be that I was present with the people who mattered most in my life, that
Wow.
I optimized my talent in a way that added immense meaningful value to people who are struggling mentally and emotionally because they themselves are high achievers. I gave them the tools to be able to live happier. I explored the world. I traveled it. I got to see places that I thought early on in my life I could never see. And I guess the last thing would be and I talked about it before. I never stopped learning. I learned until the day that I rested. What about you?
Yeah, no, and I want to lean into a couple of those really quick. I mean, because I say, what could you do today? And it's like, if I'm aware of these things that you just said, and I'm going to go to your number one about being present. Every conversation, whether you pick up the phone, whether we're having a Zoom meeting, whether I'm face to face, or whether you're standing in front of 1,000 people delivering a keynote, I am fully present in this moment. I'm telling myself and I'm reminding myself, well, I start that at age 23, 53, or 73. It doesn't matter when you start, you got to start. There's an old Chinese proverb. I don't know if you know the answer to this question. They said, when's the best time to plant a tree?
Oh, is it 100 years ago?
Yeah. Well, I mean, the 20 years ago, right, would
That's
have been the best, or 100 years ago is the best time. What's the second best time to plant a tree?
right now.
Right now. And so it doesn't matter what age you are, if that's something that you're saying is important when I get to 90 years old to look back and I want to be more present, well, I just start today in every single conversation and I'm just all in. And so you just check that first box. And I won't do all those for you, but just we start right now, right here, doing these things. And well, I am going to continue because when you talk about traveling the world, you can sit here and say, any opportunity where somebody says, "Hey Jay, we want to hire you to come do this in this city or this country." Yes, I hadn't been there. That's on my list. I've not visited there. Done. I want to go. And so now when you look back after however many years of being present, constantly traveling when somebody says you want to go to a new place and always learning and being open to all these experiences, you will have built up a million little nuggets that have then led to I'm 90 and I've absolutely exceeded my expectations of the life I wanted.
Yeah, and I have no regrets, and that's the plan, Kevin. And for Kevin, thank you, by the way, for all of this wisdom. And I feel like I've gotten a lot from this conversation personally, and I know our audience has as well. For anyone listening, I highly recommend, if you want to check out more of Kevin's work, it's kevinkarschnik.com. It'll have all your information about your keynotes, the books you've written. It's KevinKarschnik.com. And then you mentioned your book, the title of which is Joyful, Prayerful, Thankful. And that's coming out, you said, could be around Thanksgiving or maybe before Christmas.
Definitely
That's
before.
the time. Yeah, before Christmas, the timeline that's coming out. So I encourage everyone to look out for that for when it's published. Kevin, thank you again for all of this wisdom, these insights. I really appreciated our conversation. It was wonderful.
Yeah, this was amazing. Really enjoyed talking to you.
I love how in that conversation, Kevin asked me a few questions. Not often a guest does that and gets me to start thinking. I really love that. I valued that. I got a lot from it. And I hope you got a lot out of the conversation. I will do my best to synthesize it down to 3 insights and 3 actionable takeaways. The first insight: getting out of your comfort zone is a process. He had 3 steps that you go through. First, he called it the fear zone. Second was learning zone. And then the third was the growth zone. So initially there's fear. Yes, there is. And then second, the learning zone, or he also said it's the sponge zone. It's your first attempt at learning, and then you're in the growth zone. And being able to also look at it from the perspective that any security that you are sensing that you have now could be illusory, because there's no such thing as absolute security. No one knows that if the job they have now will last forever. So go through that illusion of security and prepare yourself, brace yourself for getting out of your comfort zone in order to do something that you really want to do. The second insight, know your financials. I really valued this part of our conversation because he was very real about it. And while Kevin said 18 months is the amount of runway he recommends, I would argue that it depends on the business. Some businesses do require that much time. Others don't. What you need to do, and he talked about it in the interview, is you need to interview other people. You need to find out how long it's going to take from the people who are doing what it is that you're considering doing. Certain businesses, you can start to earn money within the first 3 months. That's what my business was like when I first started. But others, it would take 18 months. So you need to know what that is and what it's going to take. And then also he recommends doing a pros and cons, really finding out what their experience is like in that business before you really venture out and take the action to build it. Third insight, when you're 90, what do you wish you will have accomplished? When you look at it from that perspective, when you zoom out and you're kind of looking back at your life, it will help you to recognize what's most important. And then the next question is, well, what do you need to do today to create that? And it's not going to be something big like leaving your job immediately. It could be just something small, but to take that small action to build towards what you really want to accomplish in your life. Actionable takeaways. First of 3. Number 1, do a time audit. You could do it 2 ways. One is do a time audit of how you're currently spending your time, right? Really document how you're doing it. But also when you have that interview with somebody that's built the business you want to build, find out how they're spending their time. That helps you to be able to create an actionable plan. Second, actionable takeaway, build the business while you're working. You don't need to take this huge risk, leave everything to build something on your own. If you really do want to build something on the side, you can while you're currently in a 9-to-5. Many people do it. Many people find a lot of success doing it this way. Third, actionable takeaway, self-discovery. He walked through how we want to consider 3 areas. 1, what are we great at? 2, what do we love? 3, what are problems people will pay you to solve? And if you know what that is and you get clear on it on one side, and then the other side is know what your values are. Know what you value, connect those dots to then create your business plan. That's going to be your blueprint. Join us on Friday's episode. I'm excited because we are getting close to our 100th episode of Unstuck. It's crazy that we're almost at 100 already. And I'm going to be going through a list, my top 10 lessons that I've learned since launching this podcast about a year ago. I've met with so many incredible guests. So I'm going to do my best to really break it down into 10 major lessons. The order, I don't know. Number 10 is going to be just as valuable as number 1 in my opinion. But still, I'm going to do my best to rank them. 10 through 6, we're going to go through this Friday. And then the following Friday, which is going to be our 100th episode, I'm going to be going through the top 5 lessons that I've learned as a host of this podcast, because I got to tell you, as host, I'm learning, I think, more than anybody. As much as I hope you're learning as you're listening or as you're watching, I feel like I'm getting the most out of this, and I'm going to share with you what I've learned. So until next time, thank you so much for listening.